And so, that's something that's obviously very significant. We want, everybody in Palm Beach County to be making the necessary preparations. We recommend 7 days of food and medicine and water because, if it hits here, there will be power outages. It's not going to be put back on right away, so please take time to prepare. I was able to speak with the county officials here. Obviously, at the state level, we've been monitoring some of the decisions or contemplations about evacuations. It's something that we obviously believe for certain people is going to be necessary, and certain communities are going to need to do that. Here in Palm Beach County, they're going to have their shelters open starting first thing Sunday morning. They have roughly 205,000 people in their evacuation zones. Obviously, not all those people are here this time of year, but they're able to accommodate the folks in those zones, at their shelters. And so they're going to be putting out guidance later today and eventually having an order in place for that. In terms of the assisted living facilities, we have the state has been monitoring and keeping track on who has complied with the requirements of generators or has a plan in place in case of a power outage. We have a website where folks can go to identify those facilities that are not in compliance. We obviously have people in the state that are either doing site visits or phone calls to those places. The county here is apprised of the facilities in Palm Beach County. They're not. Fortunately, most of them are in compliance and have a plan in place, but there are some that don't. So we want to make sure that that they take the action needed to protect people who are very vulnerable. In terms of traffic, once evacuation orders are issued, we'll be suspending all tolls on roads throughout the state of Florida. Our Florida Department of Transportation has cleared the shoulder lanes and swept the shoulder lanes on all the major highways, 95, 75, and those shoulder lanes will be open once evacuation orders are in place. And we obviously are sensitive to the traffic as people are moving. I would just say this is the one constant on this storm. The track has been here or there, and there's been a lot of uncertainty. But the one thing that's been pretty certain is that this thing's been getting stronger very consistently and completely in line with all the forecasting. And so we anticipate this arriving somewhere in Florida as a major hurricane. It could reach for Category 4 plus winds. That is a significant storm that will lead to really significant storm surge. Obviously has the possibility of having significant wind damage and destruction. But I would also say to folks, if you're in an area that has flooded in past storms like Irma, this is a slow-moving storm. You're almost assuredly to experience flooding if this thing comes across and impacts you. So take preparations. Understand that could happen. Understand that you're likely to lose power and act accordingly. So the time to act is now. This storm is slower than thought of 4 or 5 days ago, which means, we're looking at, I think, the tropical storm force winds probably coming sometime Sunday night. So make the preparations that you need. You do have some time, but that time is running out. And with that, I'm happy to take some questions.
Governor, do you think that you'll flip the roads to be northbound only if these evacuations are ordered?
We have not decided to do that. I think for several reasons. I mean, one is we're still bringing in things to assist with the storm. If you noticed with the fuel, we're constantly having trucks being refueled at the ports and then going to fill up these tanks at the gas stations. We've also gotten Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi to waive their weight restrictions on trucks so that we can bring in more fuel from out of state. So that is happening. You have some places, I think Miami, 48% of the gas stations were out as of this morning. Fuel is constantly being brought in. There's other assets that are being brought in to where the storm would be. So to close off all that traffic is probably not the way we want to go right now. But also I would note, we don't see a lot of necessarily abnormal traffic right at this minute as of this morning. Now, as orders come down for evacuation, that of course will change. But I think it's also important, and I was talking to the county officials here in Palm Beach County, they really recommend evacuating locally. They have shelters that are that are built to withstand hurricanes. It makes it much easier to be able to do that. And so if you are in an area where you're told to evacuate, know where your shelters are, know the different options that you have. It doesn't have to be everyone in the east coast of Florida gets on I-95 and just keeps driving. We know this storm is coming in a westerly direction. We know it'll eventually turn north. We don't really know where it's going to turn north precisely, and you could end up, even driving into the storm if you take that route. So, but yes, we're going to have the shoulders open, so that will allow for an increased flow of traffic.
Governor, what do the water levels look like in Lake Okeechobee, and what's your confidence that those levees will hold based on the forecast?
So the water levels are lower than they've typically been. I mean, part of that is things that we were working with the federal government on, really to try to obviate some of the environmental damage that was being caused by the discharges. That said, you're looking at a potentially significant amount of rainfall. And so we're in contact with the Army Corps. They reported to me yesterday that they had, capacity for another 4 feet. But, these things, storm of this magnitude, and particularly how slow it's going, has a capacity to dump an awful lot of water into the lake. And so we are in a situation where if the lake gets to a certain level, they obviously have their different protocols of how they deal with that with the federal government.
Can you talk about the idea of this happening at the same time that we're expecting king tides in Miami, Fort Lauderdale?
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously, I think that exacerbates it. I mean, you look at some areas, I was, seeing some of the images out of Jupiter where the water's already up to the dock in some of those places. We also have other parts of the state, places like Dixie County that have been experiencing flooding, Pasco County. So even if they're on the outer bands of the storm, they're going to be in a situation where you will absolutely see water levels rise. And so when you have a strong storm, obviously the wind can cause a lot of damage, as we saw in Hurricane Michael. It obviously leads to a lot of storm surge, which can be life-threatening. But in terms of the broadest impacts of the storm, very, very likely to be because of the flooding. And so that's just something people need to understand. And I would also say is that as this storm comes, as the water rises, be very, very careful about how you're going into this. I mean, every storm, we have people try to drive through flooded streets, and their cars end up getting stuck, and that's what's going to happen. So please be very cautious with the water.
What in terms of the nursing homes that are not compliant? Is there any action the state can take immediately, or are you just advising?
Well, no. So the state is taking visits to some of them. Some of them are being contacted via phone. Now, not all of them are in the path of the storm, and so like in Palm Beach, the vast majority of them have complied. And so what we're doing is we're informing local officials. We're informing them that they're not meeting their obligations, and obviously now's the time to make alternative arrangements. I mean, I'm glad that this case came down in Broward. I'm glad it happened, but I'm glad those people are being held accountable, because I think that sends the message now going into this storm. If you have vulnerable people in your care, it's your responsibility to make sure that you have a plan in place to protect those folks. I mean, at this point you could lose power. And so what are you going to do if that ends up happening? And so, that is really where it is responsible. We've also had, where's Eric Szilagyi, FP&L? They've written letters to all the nursing facilities about this. I don't think any of them responded to FP&L, did they? So some of them just haven't done that. And so, at the end of the day, we have a website now where you can go and click on a county, and it has all the stats and everything. And so where the potential problems are, but these folks have got to step up and protect these folks.
I want to follow up on the lake situation too, would you be considering evacuations around those communities as well?
I can tell you the Palm Beach is considering that in the areas that are close to the lake. I mean, they'll be able to tell you more about their plans. They do have shelters in those areas. But yeah, that is obviously a concern, just because, I mean, you know, you're in a potential to have some serious water events there.
We have time for one more question, guys. One more. Anybody?
All right, thank you. Appreciate it. All right. Oh, yeah, good to see you. Good to see you. Hey, thanks a lot. Yeah, appreciate you. Hey, man, how you doing? Good to see you.
Till that's 96. Yeah,
Great to see you.
Good to see you.
Yeah. Just let us know. I'll have them do that order, and then whatever else you guys need, let us know. Yeah. Good to see you. Yeah, of course. Good to see you. How are you doing? Good to see you. Yeah, of course. You know how that goes. Are you West Palm, Boca Raton? Where's your district?
Delray, Lake Worth, so I have Central. Yeah, and I have the ocean.
Lake Worth, you know, they have that municipal utility too. So it's like, you know, these guys are bringing in like 12,000 people. So, you know, I'm just concerned about, you know, having that power.